There are discoveries on Earth that feel like mistakes, not because they were false, not because they were hoaxes, but because they seem like things humans were never supposed to find. A shepherd throws a rock into a cave and accidentally uncovers ancient texts that would reshape biblical scholarship. A diver searching the sea spots a wreck and finds a machine so advanced it looks impossible for the ancient world. Farmers digging a well reveal an underground army buried for over 2,000 years. And one man, simply renovating his home, breaks through a wall and discovers an entire city hidden beneath his feet. These were not planned expeditions into the unknown. They were ordinary moments that tore open something extraordinary. This is our countdown of 10 discoveries that should not exist. Stay until the end, because number 1 begins with a home renovation and ends with one of the largest underground cities ever found. And before we begin, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to our channel. We want to see how far Forbidden Earth reaches. Number 10. Lascaux Cave, France. In 1940, in the countryside of southwestern France, a group of teenagers and their dog stumbled onto something strange. The dog had reportedly chased after a rabbit and disappeared into a hole near a hill. Curious, the boys investigated, widened the opening, and crawled inside. What they found on the walls was almost impossible to process. Horses, bulls, deer, symbols, massive painted figures stretching across the rock in flickering light. This was Lascaux Cave, one of the most stunning collections of prehistoric cave art ever discovered. At first glance, the paintings feel almost too sophisticated to be ancient. They are not random marks scratched into stone. They are deliberate, graceful, carefully composed images made by humans roughly 17,000 years ago. That alone is extraordinary. But what made the discovery so shocking was what it revealed about the people who created it. These were not crude figures living in intellectual darkness. They understood movement, proportion, symbolism, and the emotional power of image making. In other words, they were recognizably human. The cave would eventually become world famous, but fame brought a problem. Human breath, humidity, and bacteria began damaging the art, forcing authorities to close the original cave to the public. So the place that was hidden for millennia became too fragile to remain open once the world knew it existed. That is the strange pattern you will see again and again in this countdown. Some discoveries survive because they stay hidden, and the moment they are found, the race begins to protect them from us. Number 9. The Coelacanth, South Africa. In 1938, in the port city of East London, South Africa, museum curator Marjorie Courtenay-Latimer was examining a local fisherman's catch when she saw a fish she did not recognize. It was large, blue-gray, armored-looking, and its fins seemed strangely limb-like. She knew immediately it was unusual, but she had no idea how unusual. When experts finally examined the specimen, the answer stunned them. This was a coelacanth, a fish believed to have vanished from Earth roughly 65 million years earlier, around the same time the dinosaurs disappeared. It was not supposed to be here. It was not supposed to be alive. And yet, there it was, sitting in front of them like a message from a vanished world. The discovery instantly became one of the great zoological shocks of the 20th century. The coelacanth was labeled a living fossil, not because it had not evolved at all, but because its lineage stretched back into deep prehistory. Its strange lobed fins fascinated scientists. Creatures like this were part of the story of how vertebrate life eventually moved from water onto land. Finding one alive felt like rediscovering a missing chapter of Earth's biological history. What makes the story even more unsettling is how close it came to being missed forever. If Courtney Latimer had not paid attention, that fish might have passed through the docks like any other catch, cooked, sold, discarded. Instead, it became proof that the oceans still contained things science believed were long gone. The world likes to imagine extinction as final. The Coelacanth was a reminder that sometimes Earth does not care what we think is over. Number 8. Sutton Hoo, England. In 1939, on a quiet estate in Suffolk, England, a landowner named Edith Pretty asked local archaeologist Basil Brown to investigate a series of burial mounds on her property. From the outside, the mounds did not look spectacular, just raised humps in the earth. Old, silent, easy to miss. But as Brown excavated one of them, he began to uncover iron rivets arranged in a ghostly outline. Piece by piece, a shape emerged. It was the imprint of an enormous ship buried in the soil. And at its center lay one of the richest early medieval burials ever found in Europe. Weapons, jewelry, silverware, a helmet so iconic it would later become one of the defining images of Anglo-Saxon England. The Sutton Hoo discovery transformed the way historians thought about early medieval Britain. What had once been dismissed by some as a cultural dark age suddenly looked far more sophisticated, connected, and powerful than previously imagined. This was not the burial of an isolated barbarian warlord. It was the burial of someone plugged into a wide and wealthy world, and the timing of the discovery gave it an eerie emotional weight. Europe was on the edge of World War II. As modern civilization prepared to tear itself apart, archaeologists were uncovering a ship burial from a world that had vanished more than 1,000 years earlier. It is hard not to feel a kind of melancholy in that. A grave preserved under grass, a king, or someone close to one, sleeping beneath the land, and all of it waiting quietly for someone to dig in exactly the right place. History often feels far away. Sutton Hoo proved it can lie just under the surface, hidden beneath the calmest-looking ground. Number 7. Ötzi the Iceman, the Alps. In 1991, two hikers crossing the Ötztal Alps near the border of Austria and Italy spotted what looked like a body emerging from melting ice. At first, authorities assumed it was a recent tragedy, a climber, a missing mountaineer, someone who had died not long ago in the mountains. But when researchers examined the remains, they realized this was no modern corpse. The body was over 5,000 years old. Today we know him as Ötzi the Iceman. He is one of the oldest and best preserved human bodies ever found, naturally mummified in alpine ice. His clothing, tools, stomach contents, tattoos, and even the injuries he carried offered researchers an astonishingly intimate look into Copper Age life. With Ötzi, prehistory stopped feeling abstract. He was no longer just a category like early European human. He was an individual, a man with gear, wounds, and a final journey. Scientists could analyze what he ate, what he wore, and even how he died. Evidence suggested he may have been attacked. An arrowhead was found, lodged in his shoulder. Suddenly, this frozen body was not just a relic. It was the center of a very ancient mystery. There is something deeply unsettling about discoveries like this, not because they are monstrous, but because they collapse time. Ötzi does not feel like a symbol. He feels like a person interrupted. One moment, he was alive, moving through a mountain pass. Then thousands of years passed. Ice sealed him away, and when the world warmed just enough, he returned. Not by design, not through a grand archaeological expedition, but because two hikers happened to look down and see a body staring back out of the ice. Number 6. The Dead Sea Scrolls, Qumran. Sometime in the 1940s, in the desert near the Dead Sea, a Bedouin shepherd searching for a lost goat threw a stone into a cave. Instead of hearing the dull thud of rock on dirt, he heard the sound of breaking pottery. That strange sound led to one of the most important manuscript discoveries in modern history. Inside the caves near Qumran were ancient scrolls stored in jars, hidden away for centuries in the dry Judean wilderness. Over time, more caves were explored, and more scrolls were found. Biblical texts, community rules, prayers, commentaries, documents from a world standing at the edge of early Judaism and the era out of which Christianity emerged. The Dead Sea Scrolls changed scholarship forever. They pushed surviving manuscript evidence of many biblical texts back by centuries. They revealed how diverse Jewish thought and practice could be in the Second Temple period, and they opened a window into a religious world that had previously been known only in fragments. But beyond their academic importance, the scrolls carry an atmosphere that is almost cinematic. Ancient writings hidden in desert caves, stored in jars, preserved by dryness and chance, waiting in darkness until a wandering shepherd accidentally announced them to the modern world with a thrown rock. Few discoveries feel more like something out of a myth, and yet they were real, which raises the haunting question at the center of so many stories like this. How many other things are still hidden simply because no one has thrown a rock in the right direction yet? Number 5. The Antikythera Mechanism, Greece. In 1900, sponge divers sheltering from a storm near the Greek island of Antikythera descended into the water and found a shipwreck. That alone would have been enough, but among the statues, cargo, and debris brought up from the wreck was a corroded lump of bronze and wood that at first looked unremarkable. Then researchers looked closer. Inside were gears, dozens of them. Precision-cut metal gears packed into a compact device unlike anything expected from the ancient world. This object became known as the Antikythera Mechanism, and it remains one of the most astonishing artifacts ever recovered from the sea. Dating back more than 2,000 years, the device is often described as an ancient analog computer. It could model celestial cycles, track astronomical events, and predict eclipses with remarkable sophistication. That is what made the discovery so disruptive. Ancient Greece was already known for philosophy, mathematics, and engineering. But this device suggested a level of mechanical complexity far beyond what many historians imagined had been built at the time. It felt anachronistic, as if a machine had been dropped into history before it belonged there. Even today, the Antikythera Mechanism carries an almost eerie quality. It is not just impressive, it feels misplaced. The object forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. History is not always a smooth, upward path of progress. Knowledge can appear, disappear, and be forgotten. A ship sank, a device corroded underwater for centuries, and when it finally surfaced again, it made the ancient world look far more advanced and far more mysterious than we thought. Number 4. The Terracotta Army, China. In 1974, farmers near Xi'an were digging a well during a drought when they struck something hard beneath the soil. At first, it did not seem like the beginning of one of the greatest archaeological finds in history. But as digging continued, fragments of life-sized clay figures began to emerge. Heads, bodies, armor, then more, and more, and more. What those farmers had uncovered was part of the Terracotta Army, a vast buried force created to guard the tomb complex of China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. Thousands of soldiers, chariots, horses, commanders, archers, each with distinct features and carefully crafted detail. The scale of the discovery was overwhelming. This was not a small ceremonial group. It was an entire army entombed underground, hidden for over 2,000 years. The more archaeologists uncovered, the stranger it became. These figures were not generic copies, made without care. Faces differ, hairstyles differ, rank and equipment differ. It felt less like opening a tomb and more like unearthing a frozen military world. And as magnificent as the discovery was, it came with a darker undertone. The men who found it were ordinary farmers, not treasure hunters or elite archaeologists. History did not reveal itself to the powerful. It broke open under the feet of people searching for water. That is part of what makes the Terracotta Army so unforgettable. A drought, a shovel, a few feet of earth. And beneath it, an empire waiting in formation. Number 3. The Giant Crystal Cave, Mexico. In 2000, miners working in Naka, Mexico, broke into a chamber that looked less like part of Earth and more like the inside of an alien cathedral. Inside were enormous selenite crystals, some as long as small buses. They jutted through the chamber in every direction. The cave glowed pale and glassy under artificial light. It was breathtaking. It was also almost impossible for humans to survive inside. Temperatures in the chamber were brutally high. Humidity pushed close to lethal levels. Without specialized cooling suits and careful planning, a person could remain inside only briefly before their body began to fail. That is one of the strangest things about the Giant Crystal Cave. It feels like a fantasy discovery, but it came with a built-in limit. Humans could find it. Humans could document it. But humans were never going to inhabit it or move through it casually. The crystals themselves formed over immense periods of time in a stable, mineral-rich underground environment. The cave was not just beautiful, it was the result of geological patience on a scale that is difficult to imagine. And because the environment was so extreme, the place carried a sense of being fundamentally off-limits, almost as though the Earth had made something spectacular and then protected it with heat. When people talk about discoveries that should not exist, this is exactly the kind of place they mean. A chamber of giant crystals hidden underground, revealed by mining, lethal to linger in, and so visually unreal that photographs barely look convincing. Sometimes the impossible is real. It just happens to be waiting in the dark, where almost no human can stand for long enough to believe it. Sanxingdui, China. In Sichuan, China, farmers first began uncovering strange jade and artifact fragments in the early 20th century. But the real shock came decades later, when workers exposed sacrificial pits filled with extraordinary objects from a lost Bronze Age culture. Huge bronze masks, towering figures, strange faces with exaggerated eyes, artifacts so visually different from what many people expected from ancient Chinese art that they seemed to belong to another civilization entirely. This site became known as Sanxingdui, and it changed the story of early Chinese civilization. Before Sanxingdui, many narratives about ancient China were far more concentrated around the Yellow River heartland. But these discoveries revealed a powerful and sophisticated culture flourishing in Sichuan, with its own striking artistic language and ritual traditions. Sanxingdui reminds us that history is not a single clean line. It is a shattered map, and every so often, the Earth gives one of the missing pieces back. Number 1. Derinkuyu Underground City, Turkey. And now we come to the discovery that may be the most unbelievable of all. In the 1960s, a man renovating his home in central Turkey reportedly knocked through a wall in his basement and found that the space behind it did not end where it should have. Instead, it opened into a passage. That passage led to more passages, rooms, storage areas, tunnels, ventilation shafts, wells, animal stalls, chapels, entire levels descending deep beneath the ground. What he had found was Derinkuyu, one of the largest underground cities ever discovered. Derinkuyu extends through multiple levels and is believed to have been capable of sheltering thousands of people. Massive stone doors could be rolled into place to seal sections off. Air shafts brought ventilation deep underground. Entire communities could survive below the surface for extended periods of time. That is what makes the discovery feel so impossible. This was not just a cellar, not just a tunnel, not even just a hiding place. It was a subterranean world, a hidden city beneath ordinary homes, beneath fields, beneath the daily life of a modern town. Researchers believe such underground complexes were expanded over time and used as refuges during periods of invasion and instability. But even with explanations, the emotional effect of Derinkuyu remains powerful, because it forces you to imagine the moment of discovery. You are renovating your house. You break through a wall, and instead of finding empty dirt, you find an opening into a lost city. Few discoveries capture the central promise of Forbidden Earth more perfectly than that. The world beneath us is deeper, older, and stranger than it appears. And sometimes all it takes to prove it is one wall giving way. Those were 10 discoveries that should not exist. A prehistoric gallery hidden in a cave. A fish thought lost with the dinosaurs. A ship burial sleeping under English soil. A man preserved in ice for over 5,000 years. Ancient scrolls hidden in desert caves. A machine from the ancient world that looked too advanced to be real. An underground army. A crystal chamber, lethal to explore. A vanished civilization returning through bronze masks. And an entire city hidden beneath a family home. Earth is still full of things we have not seen. Not out in distant galaxies. Right here, under the soil, inside the rock, below the water, waiting for someone to look in the wrong place at exactly the right time. Which discovery shocked you the most? Tell us in the comments. And if you made it this far, you belong here. Subscribe to Forbidden Earth, because the next mystery goes even deeper.